Hello there. I am Chris Gazdick, a mental health and substance abuse therapist you have found through a therapist's eyes, where we offer a perspective of a therapist, been doing this since 1995, in personal time in your car and or your home. We're on Spotify, Apple iTunes, all those good places. We endeavor to see the world through the lens of this therapist, but being aware, Cortney, as you know, it's not the delivery of therapy services in any way, right?
Not any way.
Not any way. 5-star reviews definitely help us out a lot. Given Apple iTunes gives the ability to give us a review, that really is very important. It helps us out a lot. I really appreciate you guys hanging with us. We're at like episode, holy cow, 181. We're above 180.
That's amazing.
That's crazy. Contact at Through a Therapist's Eyes is the website. We got merchandise out there now that's pretty cool. Neil, I saw the jigsaw puzzle. I think I'm going to buy the jigsaw puzzle. I got to get the jigsaw puzzle. That looks pretty neat. Oh, he's grabbing the mic. I pulled him in.
Well, it's cool because there's actually different sizes, so you can have different counts. So if you want to get it more for kids or younger people, you can
it's got to be hard.
You can get small ones. And I actually had to make the graphic different sizes because the number of pieces dictates how big it was. So I made it. And like I'm cut off like all the outside. Crap. So I had to fix the graphics and stuff. So yeah, so I think it goes up to 500 or 1,000 pieces.
1,000 pieces?
I don't remember the exact number, but it can get pretty high. So you want to challenge, get your buddies together.
The most challenging thing on this Through a Therapist's Eyes jigsaw puzzle, Cortney, is my handwriting is actually on the top. It's tough to puzzle together. But it says, let's figure this out together. So it's pretty cool. Neil, I appreciate you kind of organizing those things. We're going to get some quotes out there on the merchandise that's pretty cool. So T-shirts are going to be coming. I don't know what time frame we're locking into that. It shouldn't take us too difficult to get those organized and put in there. But I'm just kind of excited about that. I think you're going to enjoy those. This is the human experience, the human emotional experience. Cortney, what do you think we should do? You're on.
You mean like right now?
Like the phrase. I was setting you up for the phrase.
I don't know.
Let's figure this thing out together. I'm so sorry. We are crack spotted tonight. I don't know what's up with us.
Is there a full moon?
Or is it just me? How about just me? It's just me. We do have a little bit of announcement, though. Sad to say, Cortney is one of the co-hosts that we have, and you have made the decision for purposes of self-care, energy, bandwidth. You're exploding with your business, I understand. So you have an announcement of this will be your last episode, I believe, right?
Yes, that's correct. But I have thoroughly enjoyed it. I think this is, 9th time I've done this.
Yeah, a couple months.
Yeah, so it's been fun. I've enjoyed it. I hope everyone else has too, but my capacity is limited.
Yes.
So I had to make some tough choices and say yes to say no to really good things.
Yeah. And I appreciate that. And I'll say on the show, I really appreciate what you've been doing. I've really enjoyed working with you. I'm not going to stop working with you, so we'll stay in touch and stuff. But this is the last time that you're going to be able to get her contact information. So it's, really, you got to jot it down. I think sometimes people are like, oh, I'll get it next time or whatever. So there very well, although I may work on her, y'all, there very well may not be a next time. So how can they find you with VOSM, editing services, all that stuff?
Yes, editing and ghostwriting is at yourvosem.com, and it's yourvocem.com.
Yeah. She's had some referrals. She can help you all around the world, actually, with your novels and blogs and editing, and I just love her ghostwriting ability. She doesn't know this yet, but I might take her up on the ghostwriting issue for in just time to come. Just it's in development. But we're going to start off with a revisiting of last episode's comment. So we do use comments. We do answer questions on the air when cool things come up. And I was just enthralled with, last week we talked about the education, mental health in the education system.
And we were nervous about it.
Very nervous about it. Yeah. Say why, or what do you mean?
Well, yeah, it's a hot button topic. It's a big topic to tackle. And I think we were just wanting it to come across well to all parties involved.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it did.
Yeah, I think so.
I listened to it. We got great feedback from it. So I think we tackled a really tough issue about education and mental health and all the factors that go into education. So do you remember when I said, like, I am, like, sick of this? You remember that?
Yeah.
Okay. So this what I want to read is a response that we got on Facebook. I'm going to protect her identity and just say this is from Mrs. C, because I didn't get permission. But it's on a public forum, so I feel comfortable reading it because it was so apropos and on point. And, like, I swear she was, like, in my head when I said, my whole adult life I've been hearing education reform, and I'm just sick of hearing that. It's so frustrating to me as a parent and as a person. So I wanted to read what she said because I thought she was absolutely completely on point. So she says, learning in a controlled teaching system brimming with testing, quotas, scores, obtaining funding is so far from teaching. We should all understand the frustration and fear of parents and concerned adults in the community that children can be bypassed, be relegated to a life that will not show them the thrill of learning, that will not impart the lifelong curiosity to never stop learning, and to always question in order to recognize truth and fact. Students need the tools to learn now and through their entire life. It seems stifling to me and to the teachers and administrators who must follow the dictates of non-teachers or politicians. I enjoy the show and the lively comments. Good parents worry so much, and rightfully so. Be involved, stay involved, let your voices be heard.
That's perfect. That's the summary, right?
It is exactly why I said I'm sick of it.
We all are, yeah.
You know, and I appreciate your comments and the back and forth. It's always nice to have that, but there's times when people say things just better than I could ever have thought of saying it, and that was it. It's so frustrating to see, and I think we were talking about, before the mics came on. Kids lose the passion for learning, and that's the most, harmful thing.
Tragedy.
It's
tragic.
tragic.
A tragedy.
It really is tragic.
Thank you, Mrs. C.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about marriage. I figured we had to do a marriage show.
Yeah.
Going away with Cortney because, you were on our show before talking about marriage. I know it's an issue that is near and dear to your heart. And this is a particular component of marriage that I thought gets a lot of traction and misunderstood, like resentments in marriage. Like, how do people see resentments in marriage? It's not good, right? Like, people get freaked out about this, upset about this. It causes so much strife. People worry about it. They feel alone with it.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of bitterness. Unresolved bitterness is that?
Yeah, that's a good word combo. By the way, I'm getting over allergies. I'm feeling a little bit like
you have your radio voice.
Is it my radio voice? Yeah, I feel better today. I felt all week, and I felt like I sounded great until you came and you're like, "Oh, you're nasally today." I'm like, "Oh, geez, I thought I was over this," but that's what's going on. So, as usually, like start off with like what are resentments. So let's kind of go through and identify. What do we really mean with this? Because I think you hit it really nicely on the head there with, bitterness. Lots of chronic bitterness can be the case when people get into these states of resentment, which is different than a resentment, it occurs to me. Having a state of resentment versus, getting resentments. Resentments are going to happen and we resolve them.
Right.
But the bitterness comes in when it becomes any level of chronicity. So what is a resentment? You want to read?
You want me to read it? Sure.
Or just what is it?
Is this according to Webster or some dictionary? Somewhere?
Usually.
Anger and indignation or annoyance experienced as part of what is real or perceived unfair treatment.
Yeah. And I, we're going to do a segment, I guess, in a little while. Are they normal? It occurs to me that one of the things I really want to accomplish is to help us understand that you're going to get sideways in marriage. Everyone always says that. It's a readily, easily pat thing to say. You have ups and downs and you go sideways and that's normal and all. But, I don't think people really understand the daily ins and outs of how that works. You know what I'm trying to say there?
I do. Yeah. I think daily in marriage, expectations are missed or unmet,
Yeah.
if not daily, weekly. And if those aren't resolved, they can turn into a long-term situation and conflict.
Yeah, and I guess to add to that, like people feel like they're doing something wrong if they have a resentment, or
Right.
we're doomed because
Mm-hmm.
we have these resentments. These end games of like disastrous results are imagined because you have something that happens normally.
Mm-hmm. Right. There's always hope. We just said that, right?
We did say that. That was about basketball.
Oh, yeah. Well, we won't go there right now.
No, that's an intense thing in our state of North Carolina. Duke and North Carolina playing in the Final Four. But we do digress. I love the way that they talk about resentments in AA. Mm-hmm. Do you know much about the AA program?
I know about the 12-step programs.
Yeah.
Probably more specifically the SSA,
Sex Addicts Anonymous, yeah. And there's Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, and all the anonymouses that are out there. I think they do a really good job of talking about, in recovery, how to manage resentments. Mm-hmm. Because in the phrase that I learned through learning the program is that resentments hurt the person harboring the resentment, mm-hmm. not the person that's resented.
Right.
And I have totally found that to be true. Have you heard that before?
Yeah, I've heard it in the context, and it's similar for unforgiveness.
Right.
Which is, I guess you can kind of package, as an unresent or as a resentment.
Yeah.
You're spreading to me. I can't talk.
Great for an audio show. I'm spitting up words and it's spit over to her, and now we both can't talk. Yeah, they do. They hurt the person who's holding the resentment, and that is an unforgiven state, Mm-hmm. So you've heard that before in a different context. Mm-hmm. What does that mean to you? I'm curious. Like, it's a tough thing to really rabble around.
I think it's absolutely true. However, I also think that harboring resentment, it hurts the relationship too.
Well, yeah.
But yeah, it's a personal thing, and we might talk about this later. But I see it as a choice to harbor resentment.
Okay. Definition section. Characteristic. It's a choice. What do you mean?
I don't mean the daily resentment you're talking about that's normal. I mean the long-term resentment, bitterness that never goes away.
Yeah, well, never's a long never, but that stays chronic.
That stays chronic.
So let me push back at that a little bit. What about, I mean, I definitely can see some choices that go in there for sure. But I think there's a lot of times we get into a state of mind and we really don't know that we're in a state of mind. So is there a component that can be a part of resentments in understanding what they are? There's times where you can be upset about something, feel cringy about something, feel anxious about something, helpless about something. I mean, there's a lot of angles that you can come at falling into a little bit of a trap mm-hmm. of holding and harboring a resentment mm-hmm. versus a choice where you're active in saying, I want to hold this.
So I think that's a great point. I think you have to understand what you're holding in order to release it.
Right.
So I definitely, I see that perspective. I'm coming at it from, if people don't know my marriage story, 13 years into our marriage, my husband disclosed and we discovered that he was addicted to pornography and had a sex addiction that had led to multiple affairs. So we have episodes of that podcast. I don't know what numbers they are.
Neil, would you look that up real quick? He's already on it so we can quote that. But yeah.
And we're past that. He's sober. He has been for over a decade, and we are doing well. And part of the reason for that, my part of that, is that I made a conscious choice not to harbor that bitterness and resentment from the hurt that I experienced. And it was a very conscious choice because the marriage we were fighting for was a healthy, good marriage. And I knew that if I harbored that resentment and bitterness and kept focused on me and my pain and what he did to me, quote unquote,
right,
that that marriage we were striving for would never happen.
Well, and that's one thing that came across my thoughts and looking at this issue, the idea that sometimes I think we're going to do a segment on can you identify that you actually have resentment, because I submit that a lot of times people don't even know it. Mm-hmm. It's a little easier when something blows up and then you have a clear choice. I'm going to hold this against you, or I'm going to go through and let go of that. There definitely lies in a choice when there's clarity. But realizing that you're keeping track of stuff, realizing that you're keeping score, realizing that you're monitoring the other person or putting emotional tests out at a person and then not even know gaming, right? Then that can be from a resentment that you don't even know you have, that you're engaging in this type of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
Wait, what episode we got, Neil?
It's episode 95 is with Cortney and Mark. So it's a great episode, and tune into it if you want help with your marriage, because it was really good.
Okay.
Yeah. You got more thoughts there about that. What do you mean it was really good? I'm thinking. Did you remember that?
It was such a great episode because you got both sides of the situation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And like Cortney said, it really goes back to when something like that happens on one side, it takes both. It takes both to heal and recover from it. So, and I do want to point out one thing just because it struck me. A lot of your marriage was really good, and you noticed this one thing was going to cause a problem, and I think a lot of people let that one problem ruin the rest of the good. And so I'm glad you said that, because I think a lot of people will do that, where they just, that one small thing, instead of fixing it, they let the whole thing collapse. So
right. No, it's an excellent point. Thank you for that, Neil. I mean, there's a lot there that can happen in the course of a lifetime together, and you probably will come across something. It might be an affair. It might be a
workaholism.
A business that somebody devotes all their time to.
Right.
So many things, a physical injury that is a chronic now medical condition that you didn't bank on. I mean, there's some pretty big things that can happen in your life that are going to affect your relationship. And here's a perfect time for a quote. I developed a quote during this show prep.
Yeah.
Humility is the antidote to harboring a resentment.
I love that. I think that's spot on. I think it takes looking at yourself and why you're feeling what you're feeling, and understanding that there are two people involved. And if you make it all about you, that's going to allow that resentment to fester.
Yeah, it's funny, man. You just wronged me. And now I'm supposed to think about my contribution to this problem.
Yeah.
That's a big, difficult thing to do, but it's a real thing. And guys, I'm talking to somebody who lived an incredible life journey through a very large example of that. And I know we just talked about it. I mean, I know your heart's, on that and gets that.
Yeah. Another reason I love this is I think the humility piece gets to the point of, not taking it personally, taking things personally.
Ooh, yeah, we should probably camp out there. We're going to have to do a part 2. You got to come back next week, girl.
Oh, no.
Told you I'm going to work on her, y'all. No, seriously, because say what you said again there.
I liked the humility aspect of your quote because I think a lot of resentment is created when we take things personally, whereas the offense probably had nothing to do with us.
Yeah, that is a huge, huge marriage skill. I wish I could say are good at it. I am not good at it.
I had to learn it or die.
I mean, she says that with a laugh. So, yeah, blood, sweat, and tears, I would imagine, is the truth there because, the ability to not take things personally in your marriage, it is so hard but so valuable. Like, we could do a whole show on that and need to do a whole show on that because that is a huge skill, a huge I'm going to change the word challenge. That is a challenge to not take things personally, even when they're saying something or doing something to you.
Right. Yep.
But I'm telling you, if you can just pause and camp out there in your brain and think about how you can work on challenging yourself internally with that, your marriage is going to be a whole lot better. That's a guarantee. I'll give a guarantee there. So this humility thing, I love Dave Ramsey. You know, Dave Ramsey, how he responds. I love his response. How are you today, Dave? And he says, I'm better than I deserve. You know, whether he lives that, I don't know, Dave. I hope he does. But it's a great response, at least, because it's a reminder of our own fallacies, our own failures, our own trouble spots, and our own humility to mark that and to keep that in a mindset. And then, I'm saying that, back with AA members, I mean, I don't know if you know many people in recovery. They are the most humble people.
They are.
You can find. I've said that thousands of times.
Yep, I can attest.
In my career. Because they've been to hell and back. They've lived on the street, and I don't mean that as a metaphor in a lot of instances. And they're back. They're sane. They're well. So if you can get in that touch of humility and live in that part of the recovery process that they go through, we'll be better off in the realm of resentments. So let's do a little section on what creates these resentments. Obviously, I think we've covered the first one pretty well. Unfair treatment. I mean, that definitely creates resentments. I mean, you're going to be unfair to your husband. You're going to be unfair to your wife. It's just humans. You come home, you're living, you're not thinking, you're not filtered. We struggle on a daily basis. So
we are taught to be independent, to look out for ourselves. And I think that filters into all of our relationships. And a lot of times the first person we think about whenever we want something is ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we're going to fall into the trap of being mean, unkind, all these things that we don't want to be.
Right.
And that's going to create a resentment. When you treat someone unfairly, they're going to be resentful. So there's a lot of things that happens in creating resentments that we can prevent. But this is the normalcy of it. If you're not resentful at somebody calling you stupid in the middle of an argument, there's something wrong, right?
Right.
And they didn't mean the whole word that you're really stupid, but they said it. And if you're not resentful about that, now if you're chronically resentful about that, that's a whole nother problem, a whole nother level. But you see, so that's the biggest thing, the first thing I wanted to point out in the normalcy of all this. You're going to have that happen. But in the article that I found, kind of modeled a little bit here off this episode, I thought it was really cool, some of the things that they wrote down. This was a powerful component of resentments that really got me to thinking. Their quote, or whatever they said, that this is the result of inadequately expressed emotion after a painful event or experience. And I thought, wow, if that, to me, is something that you can manage, something you can control, but something that probably as well is super highly confident, even for talkative people, the abandonment people. We talk, we express, right? We're always wanting to. There's a lot that we don't say, particularly when we're vulnerable or feeling some sort of feelings about something. We tend to hold them in, hide them, suffocate them.
Right.
Right? When you have inadequately expressed emotion, that very likely is going to absolutely lead to resentment states. I thought that was pretty on point.
Yep. Absolutely.
And then you ask yourself, well, so what types of things are going to cause pain?
Everything from the very little mundane to the big, huge, life-changing events.
She made a rhyme. I love it.
Oh, did I?
You did, mundane and pain. Oh. Right?
Just call me Dr. Seussette.
Everything from the mundane all the way up to there's so many things. I mean, goodness, the possibilities are daunting. Self-doubt. That causes pain. Shame. That causes pain. Feeling inadequate. That causes pain. Abusive partners. That obviously causes pain. It's a little dramatic, but, trauma experiences in life as we go. Confusion causes pain. Feeling lonely causes pain. Getting criticisms and receiving silent treatment. Racism, ageism, sexism.
Rejection. I mean, the list goes on.
Right? If those are causing you pain in your marriage and they're inadequately expressed, these states of resentments are going to result. This is why it is so important to find a way to connect on issues, as you and Mark talked about, even through such a tough time as finding out, sex addiction is a present entity in our marriage. You have to find a way to connect through those things. Because if you have the inadequately expressed emotion, I would say not almost a choice, you're trapped in that. That's where I get to the trapped thing. So, yeah, okay. How about feeling abandoned and engulfed, causing pain, I had said. I meant to do it off the front end, and I forgot. Anytime I talk about marriage, I like to mention emotion-focused therapy.
No, let's do it.
Right? Do you remember emotion-focused therapy?
Yes, because you
Right.
ask me every time.
I know. Because of a reason for that,
Yeah.
right? Like, it is so fundamental, and
Can I tell you a funny story?
please.
I can't say a name or anything else, but I'm ghostwriting a book. And
Okay.
this person is describing conflict and resentment in their marriage.
Yep.
And I immediately thought, oh, well, this author is the abandoned and the spouse is the engulfed. And I thought, this is why I'm done.
Oh, no.
I'm just kidding.
That's awesome. I'm so glad because that's awesome. That's honestly what I endeavor to do with that, because it is such a profound part of the cycles that people go through. It is such a normal part, and the real quick and dirty of it is you have one of two insecurities: abandonment or engulfment. Engulfment withdraws and pulls back, shuts down, puts up walls. Abandonment, people will pursue, engage, criticize, and run the person over, unfortunately, and people typically are in an opposites attract format, where one person is pursuing, the other person is withdrawing, and onward goes the cycle. And I'm telling you, if you get the reality of how common that is day-to-day life, then look at how that causes pain and look at how that deals and creates resentments.
Absolutely.
People live in it.
They do.
And we're going to talk about how to get out of it
Thank goodness.
and even prevent them. How about that? Prevent. Why do we want to prevent that? Well, what do resentments create? Let's do a quick little section on what do they create. Oh, my goodness. This was another in a good therapies list. I thought it was cool. Continual or reoccurring feelings of strong emotions such as anger when thinking about a specific interaction or experience. Continual or reoccurring strong feelings such as anger. Guys, listen, this can go on for years.
Yeah, I think to the point where, you have this buildup of recurring feelings, and then if something on a smaller scale happens, that resentment is already built up, and you're just going to, what do they call it, flip your lid?
Yeah, in a word. I was talking to a couple just yesterday in therapy, and if you could just see I wish sometimes, that's what I try to do through the eyes of a therapist, right? Through a therapist's eyes, rather. Like, watching people go through this process of where they were and where they are. And we were talking about how, and I think it's probably true, this isn't scientific, this is just anecdotally my experience through my eyes. Like, I think the vast majority of relationships tend to be conflict avoidant. Now, there's high conflict relationships as well, where people just spit out their thoughts and bang into each other, and then it's over and it's done with. And there's advantages to that. There's also disadvantages. There's advantages and disadvantages to a conflict avoidant marriage as well, though. And one of the big disadvantages is occurring to me as we're talking about this is in a conflict avoidant marriage, this idea, right? This constant chronic reality, like this can go on for years. And how many times do you hear couples say, well, we grew out apart. We grew out of love.
Exactly. We feel like roommates.
Right. That's because this stuff is ongoing and not addressed. And the chronic resentment state pervades. Back to their list, though. Continue or reoccurring strong emotions. Inability to stop thinking about the event that triggered the strong emotions. Feelings of regret, fear or avoidance of conflict. Even perpetually, you already avoid conflict, and now you're going to avoid it even more because of the resentments. Tense relationships. How about tense? That's an understatement.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's a soft word.
Soft word, yeah. Feeling invisible, which is a horrible feeling. Inadequate, which is also like, I'm in touch with that one pretty good. Or less than in some way than the other. I mean, these states of resentments can create this stuff. In your own experience, this is, again, resentments hurt the person harboring the resentment much more than the person that's resented. I mean, you're creating inadequacies in your own self. You're creating a feeling of less than or invisible, of regrets, of,
I have a question about specific examples on that last one, feeling invisible, inadequate, or less than. Do you find that typically when resentment is involved, the wives kind of are more involved maybe with children, and husbands are maybe workaholics or more involved with their careers, and that's where resentment lies, in the fact of when it comes to feeling invisible, unseen, undervalued, inadequate, because all their focused attention is over here rather than on spouse?
You know, it's interesting. My first impression is, and I'm curious what you think about that, and I go a lot more with the abandonment, engulfment cycles, which aren't gendered. So there's gender norms that we go to. Yeah, I'm going to go out and produce, or I'm going to take care of the homestead. And the other person's like, well, that's great that you're taking care of the homestead. What about me? Well, that's great that you're going out to go produce, but dang, what about me? I think that we have gender norms like that can trigger stuff. But more so, pain, I think, is not created by, because you can even take pride in that. Like, I do a great job at my job, and you can feel good about that internally. But whereas when you get into an engulfment state of mind, man, it is a sheer pain space or abandonment. It's terrifying that tends to create more of what you get when you're feeling invisible. When you're in a state of pain and not able or making the choice to express it, notice the double there. Not able or making the choice to express it, then you arrive at being invisible or less than or just faulty, inadequate, I feel like. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah. My own list was lots and lots of anger. That's what I listed before I read the article. Feeling trapped, especially when the resentment state becomes chronic. It occurs to me when I was thinking about what effects does this create. Listen, I cannot tell you how many times couples counseling have come into my office and said, I would like to gain communication skills together with him or her. Communication. We don't communicate well. We communicate differently. And I was hook, line, and sinker. Early first half of my career, I would say at least maybe a third. I'm like, yeah, we're going to work on communication skills. And I love to tell couples, like, I don't think you have a communication problem at all. And their heads just roll and run, and they do exactly what your face is doing right now. Like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, look, you've already talked about so many dynamic things like having kids and planning a wedding and dreaming up your dreams together, creating your unique passion together. I mean, you've talked about your in-laws.
The skill is there, right?
It's all in place.
Yeah.
When you get emotional, though, You can't talk about whether you're going to get Coke or Pepsi at the store. I've said that hundreds of times. And couples kind of begin to get it, right? They begin to understand, so can we say that when you have resentments, it completely blocks whether the other partner even knows it's there or not? It completely doesn't diminish. It doesn't, break down. It blocks. It destroys communication.
That makes sense.
You can't converse with somebody that you're actively resenting very well.
Right.
And all of the internal stuff that's going on with that resentment. It's very, very powerful. Good therapies list again. I go back and forth, my own theirs in this particular episode. This is where I was kind of talking about, I was thinking about it and read it when we was talking about before. How do you know you have a resentment? Well, they had some cool things. When you feel there's an unbalance of power, when you're doing that scorekeeping that you were talking about, a health and medical injuries or hurtful words, when you hear yourself saying hurtful, mean things to your spouse, you're not calling them a jackass because they're really like a donkey or something to be silly, or calling them even worse, curse word names at somebody. That happens. It's Gottman's one of four horsemen. Contempt, when you have contempt for somebody. Okay? You might have a resentment that you haven't identified.
Yeah.
And this is why you're acting so mean and unkind. So I think, because I do believe people do not intend to be mean like that, but this stuff just comes out when you're raw. So that's a little bit of a pause. Say, wait a minute, well, what do I got to do internally, to figure out my state of resentment?
What have you seen keeping score look like?
It's an interesting question. I mean, yeah, like not point totals like the NCAA basketball game.
Yeah,
You're challenging me in
it.
the moment to give good examples. People keep score with like you always, you never, those kind of phrases come out.
Yeah.
Right.
That's
I remember that when you said this, da 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 da.
Or we always, I know example. We always move to follow your career.
Right. That's an excellent one.
Yeah.
Every time I talk to the kids, you jump in and won't let me finish my sentence. There's when you track back to history and historical reality and bring it into the present, you're probably falling into scorekeeping. How's that a cool way to
Perfect.
frame it up, I think. Yeah. Let me see, where are we at? What creates? What are the effects? I think we made a good enough point about the long-term effects there are. I guess I already did it earlier, but man, I really, let's take a quick little pause and again recognize this all sounds bad, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Sounds painful and chronic. I guess we've flavored it that way in our conversation. But what happens when you have a resentment and you resolve it like pretty quickly? Right?
Right. Oh, I think you have a healthy relationship.
Right? Well, or a healthy internal process.
Right.
And I think that's the point that I want to make here is that there are a lot of times probably that you will find yourself having a resentment, letting go of that resentment, moving into a forgiveness stance, and the other person never is the wiser for having you gone through that. I mean, that's the ideal.
Oh, yeah. That's perfect. Yeah.
I don't know
That's
how
what I
often
mean
that
about.
happens.
Yeah. Well, I think often in a marriage, when you're living together and you're doing life together, I think it's going to happen often.
Right. All the time.
Yeah. And that's normal.
I don't understand why she can't freaking cook a piece of chicken. It's overcooked every time. She's so panicked about this. Is so stupid. Stop it. What are you talking about? She just cooked you meals all week long.
Right.
What are you complaining about? And she has no idea you just went through that dialogue. Right? This is so normal. And I think that, in a lot of natural states, we're catching it. We're aware of it. We are, mature people and grown adults. and we can kind of catch ourselves. And I think we do a lot. So yeah, this is way normal.
So if people can catch themselves doing it, can that lay the foundation for them being able to do it for the bigger things or the things they're not even aware of, or those big anger when they're...
Yeah, those are the things that do develop that. It's kind of insidious. It gets under your skin and you don't even know what's bugging you.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that happens a lot of times too, which is probably why I've flavored and focused on this a lot more.
I know people who journal to help themselves figure that out.
Go further with that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, I think it's not just resentment. I think a lot of people struggle with defining or, kind of diagnosing their own emotions. Like they feel something, they know that. But a lot of people have been from childhood even trained to suppress them, so they don't even know what they're feeling at times.
Trained to suppress them. Love that. That's on point. Which, going back to feeling, you get trapped. You get trapped in this a little bit because when you don't even know that it's going on, because you're just doing what you were kind of trained to do.
Right.
But you're right. There's probably several things. Journaling, as you mentioned, to sort through what you're experiencing. I'm a big believer in friendships. You've got to chat it out with a friend, and when you're chatting and getting their responses, you're working out what it is that you're experiencing with these emotions.
And is it helpful to kind of feel the physical parts of your emotions and kind of figure out, like, oh, wait, my heart's beating faster or my stomach is clenching. I must be angry or frustrated.
Teeth grinding.
Yeah.
Why do I have a teeth grinding issue? Something's grinding at me. Yeah, absolutely. Thirdly, pay attention. Pay attention to your body cues, because your body will tell you. You're exactly on point. What you're experiencing. Before you even cognitively know it. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, it is.
We've talked about the implicit bias on the show before, and we've talked about the subconsciousness reality, and there's a really cool journaling activity where you just free write. This freaked me out, but I'm going to put it in here real quick because it works. So, and maybe you've heard of this before. You take a free writing journaling, just your thoughts, whatever, and then you circle 10 words, and then you take those 10 words and you narrow that down to the 7 most important words in those 10. And then you write a sentence using as many of those leftover words there that you can use in a sentence. That sentence
Oh, wow.
is on point.
Really?
Yeah.
That's fascinating.
It really is. I did this at a conference, and I mean, I forget what sentence it said, but I read the sentence and I'm like, that's exactly where I've been.
Oh, wow.
All weekend.
Well, yeah, I use this in writing, even creative writing,
Okay.
because the whole idea in writing is to show, not tell something. So you want readers to experience it and not just hear about a scene,
Okay.
right? So I actually
I love
try
that.
to sit there
Writing
and say,
is showing, not telling.
yeah. And so you don't want to say he was angry. You want to say his face was flushed, his fists were clenched, And so I actually use that in writing as I try to put the physical next to the emotion, so I'm not using the emotion itself.
I will now as well. Thank you for that teaching. Seriously, that's awesome. And I've known that telling a story is huge because you're conveying a whole experience, here in this deal, and not just telling somebody. It's there's a lot there that to identify, unpack what it is that you're experiencing through journaling, through talking with a friend, through paying attention with your body. Kind of like to get one more, but I think we need to move on.
Yep.
Yeah. I do want to read this. These were my thoughts. So typically and many times over, we handle this internally, the resentment. So are they normal? In a word, like, dude, yes, please hear how normal this stuff is. And I was just thinking about it, and I wrote, we may feel resentments, then come to a new understanding when the emotion subsides. Thus, we realize the other person did not mean it that way, or they just had a moment. And I'm thinking that ultimately we forgive, sometimes prior to the other person even knowing that we had the resentment. we can enter into a forgiveness state. So now we can proceed to problem solving or making agreements and new understandings and new agreements because you're free. And you've gone through this internal process and you're absolutely free from, the captivity, burdens and chains that resentments can create.
Have you heard of the 4 Agreements, the book?
I have, actually, yeah.
So one of them is don't take anything personally.
Okay.
And that just slides right into all of this.
It's a big part of marriage, yeah. Okay, so let's move on to the next segment here of I thought about how can we cope with them. So you have them all the time. They suck. They're normal. So how do we cope? How do we cope with having resentments? I think this starts with a forgiveness attitude. They talk about having an attitude of gratitude. It rhymes. I think that was on my list as well. But I really think this starts with, being able to. Honestly, Courtney, it occurs to me as I was just setting that up. I probably should have said this really starts from the humility. Back
it
to
does.
my quote.
Yeah, it does.
Right. The antidote to resentments is humility.
Yep.
We need to put that on a merch cup or a T-shirt. If you have humility, then you can move, and then you start the process of recovering from a resentment with a forgiveness attitude. So you look at yourself, you realize you're not perfect. Don't forget it. And there by the grace of God go I, as they say. And then you develop the forgiveness attitude, which, in an early marriage, you newlyweds out there, man, you're so good at this. Because you haven't built up the layers of frustration and crud that we let build up, corrosion on our emotions. How's that for telling a story?
There you go.
Of emotions. And you just sort of, they didn't mean it. They're kind of cute. They just weren't thinking very clearly that day, or whatever you'll come up with to develop a forgiveness. Now, I'm not talking about being naive.
Right.
That's a whole different
or abused
problem, or abused.
Right.
Right. But when you develop a forgiveness attitude, you can see through the nonsense. I say with parenting all the time, you have to see through the behavior of your kids, develop X-ray vision.
Is that because you feel loved?
What do you mean?
So like when people are first married, I think they feel loved. I mean, this person just chose them, right? And so over time, I think those feelings of being cared for and loved diminish if there's no intentionality back and forth.
I think so.
To address that.
I hadn't thought about that, but when your love tank is full, it's another book.
All your relational needs are being met.
Right. And you feel good about that, and that makes it easier to stay in a state of forgiveness that you'll need all the time.
Because it's not personal. You know
Again, you
that
don't
they
take it
love
personally.
you. Right.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent point. We did an episode on 94 to go deep into this. We're not going to be able to go deep into this. How can we go deep into the idea of letting go? Good gosh. It's a lot. Janice Holly Booth was on our show, and she was awesome in episode 94, talking about the process of letting go. Listen to her chapters. Baggage was the first one. And then courage, solitude, introspection, and then I love the issue of the last chapter where she talked about commitment. Letting go is a whole process. Like I said, I'm not going to have time to go there, but if you really have a pretty strong state of resentment that you're managing, if you've got a lot of these intense feelings, you've been keeping score, you're saying mean things to your spouse, and you're identifying this, there may be, she went through a life journey of letting go. You talked about, the letting go that you had to go through. What was it, your 7 days or 3 days of something?
There was 9 days,
okay.
But it took a lot longer than that. That was the raw, pain part of learning stuff.
Right. But that initial 9 days of torment and licking the floor, she went and did that's what I say when I'm in a bad spot, man. I was licking the floor.
Yeah.
It's a horrible. So she went and did journeys, literally their journeys to the West. And she talked a lot about, and you could take a deep dive on her letting go of so many things in her life that she had been carrying with her. Only pack what you can carry was the title of her book, if I'm correct, I think. Vulnerability. That's how you cope.
Yeah.
Tolerating the ability to be vulnerable. Sounds like fun, right?
It builds intimacy.
Yeah. Remember, unexpressed emotion tends to create these states, right? So you do need to practice, build up your ability to be vulnerable, because that is not a natural state. You start with smaller things to be vulnerable, and then you take another step with another thing, and then maybe another step. Add another person in your life that you open up another little step, and you begin to build and grow the ability to be vulnerable. It's a requirement, almost, in a marriage.
Yeah, it is.
Here's an interesting thought. Can you have a healthy marriage if you do not have the ability to be vulnerable?
I don't think so.
No. And does your ability to be vulnerable have anything to do with your spouse?
I don't think so. That's another choice.
It is. She puts her hand in the air, Yeah, I mean, these are, but boy, we do like to blame our spouse. Well, every time I've tried to tell them anything, they don't listen to me. They just shut me down or criticize me or something. No, your ability to be vulnerable has nothing to do with the other
Yeah,
person.
if you start with if you start with what your fears are, people are more apt to listen when they don't feel like they have to go on defense mode.
Yeah.
So,
but say that again or more about that. That's big. That's a big
so
moment.
when I'm being vulnerable with my spouse, I know I need to start with what I'm feeling and not make it about what he's doing or what's happening to me or how I'm perceiving that. But it's more about, okay, I have this fear or I have this hurt. And when you start with the I, right?
I statements.
I statements, but
Therapy 101. Use I statements. Don't use you statements.
But when you're vulnerable with what you're afraid of, because really it all boils down to, like, when I was angry, I was really afraid. I wasn't angry.
Yeah.
I was afraid of losing the marriage or of being hurt again. It was all fear-based. And so when I'm vulnerable in that way and say, this is what I'm fearing that our marriage is going to dissolve, there's less about what he did and more about what I want us to have and how he can be a part of it.
Yeah.
And there's no self-defense mode that goes up, like defending, what happened.
It's probably on par with speaking earlier about being able to, allow others to see the vulnerability in marriage and not taking things personally.
And admitting when you're wrong. That's vulnerable.
Definitely a hard thing to do as well. But again, not taking things personally and then being able to, to speak about your own experience, your own vulnerability and what your own, even when somebody screwed you over.
Yeah.
I'm supposed to, okay, Courtney, let me challenge this. Okay, so my wife has an affair on me and I'm supposed to come here and say how my feelings are, when they like literally broke vows. How am I supposed to come to myself and talk about how what I'm fearful of? I'm fearful I'm going to kill them right now.
Yeah.
People can get into that state, right?
Yeah. Yes.
In powerful rawness.
Yeah. And there's righteous anger. There is a thing, righteous anger.
There is a thing.
But it's how you handle that anger and how you communicate it that matters.
Right. Because in those intense moments and in that intense time when something's kind of coming out and you've stumbled upon something, humility.
Right. And if you don't express the anger appropriately and you hide it or stuff it, it'll come out later as resentment anyway. So
over and over and
right.
over and over again.
The one thing I said to my husband early on was, you may have broken your vows, but I don't have to break mine.
There you go.
And my point was, I want to restore this. I'm not going to dive into I wish you were dead mentality, though I wanted to.
Even though
I wanted to, but
here's a new quote from a book I'm writing now.
All right.
Right?
A sneak peek.
A sneak peek way in advance because I'm not in a rush in the pandemic, as you know. it is easier to see your spouse than to be seen by your spouse.
Mm-hmm.
Something I've been playing around with lately in my mind a lot, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Boy, think about that for just a second.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it is easy to kind of look and see and observe what you're being shown if you're willing and humble enough, grateful enough to be shown. You know, the reality of this is to be seen, to be vulnerable, to show.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's great, Courtney. You know, you could show me your thoughts and whatever, and I'll look and see that. But you ain't gonna, I don't need no, you don't need to know what I'm thinking. It's hard.
Mm-hmm.
Way, way harder.
Mm-hmm.
And again, so this is challenging.
Yeah.
If you tuned in to listen to this show at why your husband is such a jerk or why your wife is so stupid, and we're saying, like, hold on a minute. Look at what the challenges you have internally. By the way, you're way more empowered there.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
You're completely disempowered with what the other person's doing anyway.
Right.
Develop empathy. Speaks for itself. How do we cope with resentments and how to resolve them? Manage outstanding stress. The cornerstone of mental health is self-care. You ever hear me say that before?
No, never.
1,000 times over. Right? If you're in a constant state of just, parents out there, look, give yourself some grace. By the way, is that on my list?
Next. It's next.
Is it next?
Yes.
Oh, there we go. Yeah. Right. When you're having stress or your work is edgy right now, or you do have medical complications that you're trying to work through, your ability and state of mind to handle resentments is going to be diminished. So you have got to take care of the priority of self in order to cope with the resentments. Yeah, solidify the self. Grace, give yourself some grace. It was next on the list.
Was.
Right? My phone has got another potential scam phone call right now. Do you get these?
Yes, all the time.
It's nauseating. All right, one of the most challenging things about relationships is to see the perspective of the other person.
Mm-hmm.
Somehow we do this well with the innocence of a child as we parent. I don't know why. I do know why. It's because they're defenseless. They
don't know better.
They're innocent.
Right.
Why we don't do this with our spouse?
Oh, it's a game.
Mind.
It's a game changer.
Right?
It's a game changer. When I was able to understand that my spouse was an addict and therefore was also a victim to some degree, I was able to look at him differently.
Absolutely. When you know something's going on in the other person's life that is hurting them or hounding them or trapping them, I'm not saying you have to tolerate it forever.
No. And even on a smaller scale, when someone is having something going on at work and they're extremely stressed and then come home and snap, to be able to see the perspective of what they're handling all day long, kind of like a child at school who comes home and feels safe again and unleashes the tantrums that they held in at school.
Right.
Why can't spouses do that either? Now, I realize we're adults.
Yeah,
but
there's a little more accountability there
right.
as an adult than there is a child. But it is the same thing.
It's not about us.
It isn't about us, yes. Going back to taking things personally. I like that. Choose the focus point. Often, I talked about this in Re-Understanding Emotions and Becoming Your Best Self. It was one of the 4 primary categories that I'm going to be doing a class on, by the way.
Oh,
soon.
good.
I am. Yeah, I'm excited about that. And that was one of the 4. And I probably need to make that a bigger part of the 4 because I brought it up multiple times.
Right.
As opposed to the other pieces. Because this goes back to your choice.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Right.
As you choose what you focus on, that determines what your emotion is.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That's a cool quote. Mm-hmm. As you choose what you focus on, that determines what your emotion is.
Mm-hmm.
I actually think I have a chapter on that in the book somewhere along those same lines. Because, man, you can focus on what they did over and over and over again to you all night long. How do you think that morning's going to go?
Right.
That's ugly. It's going to be ugly.
Yeah.
And you're going to be feeling pain the entire time. Now, again, I love how you point out we're not talking about abusive situations when you're being harmed physically or emotionally. That's a different scenario. We're not talking about the naivete of just, forgive them and let them be, and it's all fine. And we're not talking about codependence where I'm going to make them well. And all. We're just talking about get grounded in what you're choosing to focus on.
Right.
When you're harboring things, especially.
It reminds me, I think it was episode 95 that we referred to in the beginning where my husband and I were on the show, and we said we learned and we teach other couples when we mentor them to focus on not on the reaction that you're getting from your spouse, but to minister to the pain underneath.
You've talked about that.
Yeah. So when someone comes home, let's say, we'll use the example again of stress at work, and they blow up at you. Okay, I can see that you had a bad day, kind of a thing.
Right.
Not in those words, maybe, but to understand, okay, it's, there's minister to the pain underneath that is producing that reaction that you're the victim or target of.
Yeah. Yeah, you've made a point of that. I think you and Mark talked about that really eloquently in that episode when we took a deeper dive on that.
So you're choosing to focus on something.
It is a choosing focus point, but I was going to say, the giving that you're, the gift that you're giving when you really look at your own perspective and how you're seeing the other person in their pain, and it is a game changer. I think you said a little bit ago. It changes the way that you're going to interact, and gosh, it just destroys the resentment.
It does.
Destroys the resentment at the root.
Yep.
How do we prevent this stuff anyway in the first place, right? Let's do a quick little segment here at the end on how can we prevent this stuff. I thought about apology forgiveness cycles. Now here's that's another whole show as well that I think we've done. I'm not going to take the time to quote it and see if we did or not in an episode, but apology forgiveness cycles are invaluable to everyday life with your spouse. There's another quote.
There you go.
Apology forgiveness cycles are invaluable. They're almost necessary to live a life with your spouse. And here's the point that I always love to make about apology and forgiveness cycles. Do you need an apology to come first before you enter into a forgiveness cycle? Or do you need forgiveness to come first before you actually
it's the
apologize?
Chicken or the egg?
Right?
No, I don't think you need the apology first.
Whichever side that you're on is the side that goes first.
Right. Just do it.
Right? Because if you're waiting on an apology to forgive, or you're waiting on them to apologize correctly,
then you're not ready for forgiveness.
No. And you're just going to hang on to it.
Yeah, you're not positioned to forgive anyway.
Right?
If you're waiting.
So you're going to go through apology forgiveness cycles. You're going to be on both sides of that thing many times over, throughout a week. If you think about it. And so, apology forgiveness cycles prevent resentments. Developing an attitude of gratitude comes up again. If you're really humble and aware of yourself and your own realities that I think we've hit on throughout our conversation today, that's going to limit resentments. If you're grateful, and that goes back to feeling loved in the beginning of a relationship. You're all warm, gooey, and this is great. They actually chose me, and then you can easily access gratitude for that until that wears off and wears out. So how do you develop an attitude like that? Well, there's gratitude lists. There's daily thoughts and reminders. This is why we connect. This is why we give compliments. Can you receive compliments? These are...
And surround yourself with people who are grateful.
Oh, in your marriage?
Yeah. I mean, other couples who are grateful, or other friends who aren't going to put your spouse down and feed into that resentment. Surround yourself with positivity and people who are grateful for things and can show you that gratitude. And
can a couple be a couple without other couples?
Huh? I think we've lost
Tongue
you.
Twister. Can a couple be a couple without other couples? Meaning, you just be, you live in a social environment.
Right.
So you engage people as individuals, and then couples engage couples as couples kind of as well. Now I just want to do a tongue twister just to have fun with it. But I think it's a really good point. That's an excellent moment, Courtney. Exposure, learn to tolerate this. Being careful, but develop expectations the right way. We did do a whole nother episode on expectations. I know that. Look, expectations get a bad rap, but if you really set up expectations together in a healthy and productive way, then you're going to know what to expect and you're not going to develop resentments. Resentments are, in a nutshell, expectations are developed through agreements or long-term norms. Mm-hmm. And I always like to use the idea, if you have lunch on Sundays every Sunday for 72 weeks, probably this week on Sunday at about 2 o'clock, we're going to have lunch. And I can expect that.
Right.
Okay. Long-term norms and then mutual agreed agreements. That's the way you can develop expectations. If you're developing them pretty much any other way, you're screwed.
Right.
You're screwed and you're going to have resentments. They're not going to meet your needs. They're not going to meet what you think things should be like, and resentments are born that way. So it is a wonderful expectations. They're a great thing, right? Done the right way. They're a wonderful prevention for resentment states. Don't let the build-up address relationship issues as they present. And then a good old-fashioned, what is something that old couples say they have learned to do in their marriage?
Drink wine together? No, I'm just kidding. Compromise.
Compromise. You know, I love that about, you know, you ever talk to many old couples that have been together for a while? I love having those conversations. And that's one that usually comes up in those conversations. Well, you know, young man, that's what he says to me. Well, you know, young man, you really have to learn how to compromise. You have to learn how to give and take.
She wanted to do A, I wanted to do B, so we compromised and did A.
Right. Courtney, it has truly been a joy to work with you
It's
through
been
these
fun.
episodes. I enjoy your perspective, your beautiful sharing. You're an awesome person. I appreciate you kind of providing the teaching that you've done on the show. It's been well worth the while. So thank you very much. Thank you.
You're welcome. It's
All right.
been fun.
We will be moving on next week with, I think Mr. Graves is on tap to be the co-host, Mr. Old co-host from before. Hope you guys are doing well in the world. I know we do have some tough things in the world with Ukraine. I did mention that I was going to talk about that. I didn't today. Be careful about propaganda. I'll just give a little teaser out there for that. Take care. Have a good week, and we'll talk to you soon.